There's a reason certain World War II veterans spoke about a specific camouflage pattern with a kind of quiet respect. Not flashy, not famous, not mass-produced across every front, but so effective that patrols using it could move frighteningly close to enemy lines without detection. Before we get into the meat of the story, let's set the tone properly. When you study camouflage history long enough, you start noticing that the patterns that really work aren't the glamorous ones printed on posters. They're the ones developed out of raw necessity, tested in mud, forests, and combat patrols, where one mistake meant never returning. And the pattern we're covering today is one of those brutally practical wartime inventions. It wasn't designed for parades. It wasn't made for propaganda photos. It was built by specialists who understood that survival depended on disappearing so thoroughly that even a motivated enemy couldn't isolate, shape, shadow, or movement. This was the kind of camo that didn't just help soldiers blend in. It allowed them to ghost through terrain, close distance, and gather intelligence from shockingly close range. Now, let's get straight to the real history. How World War II turned camouflage from an art form into a science. Before World War II, most armies still thought camouflage meant picking a dull uniform and hoping for the best. But specialized units, scouts, snipers, saboteurs, forward observers, needed more than khaki. They needed patterns tailored to specific light levels, environments and distances. The pattern that emerged as a standout came from a combination of field experimentation, biological observation, and early optical research. What came out of that mix became, honestly, one of the most effective concealment tools of the entire war. The British Denison brushstroke camouflage, used heavily by paratroopers, commandos, pathfinders and reconnaissance units. What made the Denison design unique wasn't the colours themselves, but the way those colours interacted with the natural world. Hand-applied, irregular and intentionally uneven, the brushstrokes disrupted the human outline better than most machine-printed patterns of the era. Its genius was in its imperfection, and that's a theme modern camo designers still study. Why the Denison pattern was nearly impossible to spot at combat distance. The brushstroke pattern performed exceptionally well because it solved three major problems that most camouflage patterns of the era overlooked. First, it broke the vertical shape of the human torso with slashing horizontal and diagonal streaks. Human vision is wired to detect vertical forms, so fragmenting that silhouette immediately made soldiers harder to track. Second, it blended both macro and micro patterns. From a distance, the large tan background merged with European foliage, while the green and brown streaks dissolved the body shape. Up close, the uneven brushwork looked organic rather than printed. Third, no two smocks were identical because the strokes were applied by hand. This meant entire squads could operate without appearing like a recognizable uniform grid. Veteran accounts mention German patrols scanning tree lines with binoculars only to have British recon elements sitting motionless just meters away, completely unnoticed. In some instances, paratroopers reported lying in low grass during broad daylight, hearing foot patrols pass at arm's reach. This wasn't exaggeration. The science backed the stories. How elite World War II units weaponized this camouflage in real operations. The Denison smock wasn't just a piece of gear, it was a tool used strategically. Airborne troops wore it during drops where landing zones were hot. Commandos used it in infiltration raids along the French and Norwegian coasts. Snipers combined it with scrim netting and local vegetation. Recon units exploited it for daytime crawling approaches in open terrain. Consider a typical commando infiltration. The team would move at dawn, using the rising light angle to their advantage. The brushstroke pattern broke up reflected light on the smock's surface, preventing the flat panel effect that gives away many uniforms. When the soldiers paused, they'd hold positions that aligned the smock's darkest streaks with the shadowed parts of the terrain. The result was a near-perfect blending effect that made their bodies dissolve into the environment. For survivalists today, these operational methods matter just as much as the smock itself. A good camo pattern is only half the tool, the other half is how it's used. How you can apply the same WWII concealment principles today. If you're into survival, bushcraft or tracking, there are real lessons you can apply immediately. Start by matching your pattern scale to your environment. The Denison worked because the brushstrokes were long enough to break body shape, not just add texture. So when you choose gear today, focus less on the brand and more on how the pattern breaks your outline at 3 distances: up close, mid-range and 100 meters out. Another principle is intentional imperfection. The hand-applied nature of World War II patterns gave variety that modern prints sometimes lack. You can mimic this by adding scrim, mud, charcoal streaking or even foliage to disrupt your form, instead of relying solely on the uniform. Movement discipline is another transferable skill. World War II recon troops practiced halting with their camouflage aligned to shadows and terrain features, not just stopping anywhere. If you're hunting, scouting or evading detection, adopt the same approach. Break your outline, match light levels, and keep still long enough to let the background visually claim you. A final lesson is avoiding pattern repetition. In the field, anything that looks too regular becomes suspicious. Soldiers in World War II often rubbed dirt into their smocks or tied strips of cloth around their gear to break symmetry. You can use the same tactics whether you're filming a documentary reenactment, practicing stealth movement, or running field exercises. The legacy of a pattern that proved simplicity beats hype. The Denison brushstroke pattern influenced countless designs that came after it. Modern multi-terrain patterns, transitional blends, and macro-micro hybrids echo what that early smock achieved with just a few streaks of paint, and a deep understanding of how the eye recognizes forms. Its effectiveness wasn't theoretical. It was proven by units that survived because of it. If you're a history buff or a survivalist, this pattern stands as one of the clearest examples of how wartime innovation can outpace modern marketing claims. Its power came from real combat needs, nothing more, nothing less. If you found this useful, make sure you subscribe to Warfield Survival, leave a comment so we can keep digging into forgotten wartime techniques, and share this video with someone who respects serious history as much as you do.